My hands are trembling now, watching the steam rise from this cup of tea, but back then they were steady. They had to be. A watchmaker's steadiness or a surgeon's, though I was neither. I was a factory man, a creature of grease and tolerances, of calipers and micrometers. I look at the skin on my knuckles, spotted with age and loose like an oversized glove, and I try to remember the strength that used to reside there. Memory is a liar. Of course, it polishes the rough edges of terror until they look like heroism, or it erodes the moments of quiet until only the screaming remains. But I remember the brass screw. I remember exactly how the light from the single hooded bulb caught the thread as I twisted it into the housing. It was a Tuesday, I think, or perhaps a Thursday. The days had lost their names in Leipzig, measured only by the shifts at the plant and the depth of the shadows we lived in. I was sitting in the cellar beneath a bakery that had run out of flour 3 months prior. The air was a physical weight, cold and heavy, tasting of wet brick, ozone, and the sour, pervading stench of stale cabbage that seemed to seep from the very foundations of the city. In the ordinary world, the world before the madness took hold, my hands created. That was the joy of it, to take a heap of raw steel and coax it into a piston, a gear, a drive shaft. There was a logic to it, a clean, impartial morality. If you cut the metal true, the machine ran. If you were sloppy, it failed. The machine did not care if you were a party member or a Jew or a communist. It only cared about the physics. I missed that purity. I missed the smell of clean grease, the camaraderie of the washroom where we scrubbed the day's labor from our skin with harsh soap, talking about football or women, never about politics. But in that cellar, my hands were learning a new language. I was not building to create. I was building to unmake. The device on the crate before me was a perversion of my trade. A timer, a simple clockwork mechanism stripped from a kitchen alarm, rewired to complete a circuit, not to wake a sleeping family, but to ignite a fuse. It felt wrong. Every instinct in my muscles rebelled against it. The metal felt cold and hostile. I was using the logic of creation to engineer silence. I paused, the screwdriver hovering. A floorboard groaned overhead. The sound was soft, domestic, the kind of noise a house makes when it settles for the night. But to me, it was a thunderclap. My breath hitched in my throat, trapped behind a wall of sudden, jogged panic. I froze, eyes darting to the wooden slats of the ceiling, watching the dust motes dance in the cone of lamplight. This was the fear. It wasn't the fear of death. Death was simple. Death was just the machine stopping. No, the fear was the room with the drain in the floor. The Prince Albrechtstrasse, or the local equivalent in the basement of the Leipzig Gestapo headquarters. It was the fear of the pliers and the water and the sleeplessness. It was the fear that my mind would break before my body did, and that my voice would spill the names of the others. Lut, Thomas, the old man who brought us the wire. I looked at my hands and I didn't see fingers. I saw tools of betrayal. If they caught me, these hands would sign the confessions. I sat there a statue in the damp dark, waiting for the heavy tread of jackboots, the shout, the splintering of wood. Silence returned, just the muffled, rhythmic thrum of the city outside, a low growl of trucks and distant industry. The house was empty. It was just the wind or the rats or my own fraying nerves. I exhaled, the breath shuddering out of me, creating a momentary fog in the chill air. I forced my attention back to the mechanism. The final connection. I wrapped the copper wire around the terminal, tightening it with a precision that bordered on prayer. It was done. A small, ugly thing. A ghost in the machine, waiting to haunt the oppressors. Then came the sound I had been waiting for. Not a creak, but a deliberate, rhythmic impact on the cellar door. 3 sharp raps. A pause, 2 more. The code. I looked at the device one last time, then at the door. The waiting was the worst part, they always said, but they were wrong. The waiting was torture, but the movement was suicide. I packed the mechanism into my satchel, wrapping it in an oilcloth rag. The time for hiding in the dark was over. I had to walk out into the night. Into the belly of the beast I intended to gut. We moved through the streets like smoke. The blackout was absolute, turning Leipzig into a necropolis of jagged silhouettes, and suffocating darkness. There were 4 of us. I didn't look at their faces. It was better not to memorize what you might have to forget. We were just shapes in coats, heads ducked against the wind that smelled of coal smoke and fear. The HASAG plant loomed ahead, a sprawling cathedral of iron and brick. Even in the blackout, it felt alive. It vibrated. The ground beneath my thin soles hummed with the energy of 1,000 machines chewing on steel. This was the threshold. Outside, the laws of the Reich applied: papers, curfews, salutes. Inside, the laws were physical. Pressure, heat, momentum. I was the key. That's why I was there. I knew the circulatory system of this beast. I knew that the ventilation shaft in the north sector had a rusted grate that had been scheduled for repair since 1941. I knew that the shift change at 200 left the loading bay corridor empty for exactly 7 minutes. We slipped through the grate. The transition was violent. We went from the biting cold of the Saxon night into a wall of heat so thick you could almost chew it. The air tasted of sulfur, hot oil, and the metallic tang of grinding steel. The silence of the streets was replaced by a roar, a chaotic, rhythmic cacophony of presses slamming down, lathes screaming, and the deep, subsonic pulse of the generators. I took the lead. My mechanical aptitude, once my livelihood, was now my compass. I navigated not by street signs, but by pipes. Steam lines meant we were near the boilers. The high-pitched whine of pneumatics meant the assembly line. I moved with a strange dissociation, my mind splitting into 2. One part was the terrified animal, trembling at every shadow that looked like a guard's greatcoat. The other was the professional, analyzing the facility with cold detachment. We reached the first checkpoint. It was supposed to be empty. It wasn't. A flashlight beam cut through the gloom, sweeping over the pipes just feet above our heads. We pressed ourselves into the recesses of a large turbine housing. The heat radiating from the machine was searing, singing the hair on my arms. But I didn't dare flinch. I watched the boots of the patrol pass, heavy, hobnailed, confident. They stopped. One of our group, a young man whose name I never asked, shifted. His boots scraped against the concrete. The sound was swallowed by the factory's roar to my ears. But the guard turned. He didn't shout. He didn't raise an alarm. He just stepped into the shadows where the boy was crouching. I didn't see it happen. I only felt the scuffle, a sudden flurry of motion in the dark, a stifled gasp that didn't belong to the factory's vocabulary. Then the guard stepped back out, adjusting his tunic. He dragged something heavy into the deeper dark behind a stack of crates. The boy was gone. Just like that, the reality of it hit me like a hammer to the chest. This wasn't a story. This wasn't a plan on a piece of paper. The boy was gone, erased, and we had to keep moving. If we stopped to mourn, we died. If we stopped to vomit, we died. The logic of the machine demanded forward motion. I signaled the others. We moved deeper, climbing a narrow maintenance catwalk that overlooked the main floor. Below us, the forced laborers moved like ants, gaunt figures in striped rags feeding the hungry machines. I saw a foreman strike a man with a wrench, saw the labor fall, saw the line keep moving around him. The rage flared in me, hot and blinding, but I pushed it down. I had to be cold. I had to be steel. We reached the target sector, the primary gear press for the tank tread assembly. It was a monster of a machine, 3 stories tall. A rhythmic guillotine that stamped out the tracks for the Panzers rolling east. If we killed this, the line would stop for weeks. I dropped from the catwalk, landing in the shadows behind the hydraulic reservoir. I reached for the satchel, my fingers brushing the oilcloth. I knew exactly where to place the charge, a weakness in the casting of the main drive gear. I peered around the reservoir to check the sightline. My heart stopped. The diagram was wrong. Or the routine had changed. Directly beside the press, sitting on a crate that shouldn't have been there, were 2 SS officers. Not regular factory guards. Black uniforms, the Totenkopf on the cap. They were smoking, laughing, a bottle of schnapps between them. They were less than 5 meters from the insertion point. We were exposed. We were trapped in the dead end of a maze we had built for ourselves. I looked back at the others, seeing the white of their eyes in the gloom. The charge was in my hand, useless. The path back was blocked by the shift chain. The path forward was blocked by death. The factory roared around us, indifferent and deafening, and for the first time that night, I didn't know how to fix it. We crab-walked backward, the leather of my boots scraping silently against the grid of the floor. My heart was a piston hammering against my ribs, threatening to crack them. We couldn't stay there. The SS officers were a wall of black wool and arrogance we could not breach. I signaled to the others, up. We had to go up. We found a rusted service ladder slick with condensed steam and grease, ascending into the suffocating heat of the upper gantries. The air up there was thick enough to chew, tasting of sulfur and burnt iron. We were in the throat of the beast now, suspended above the factory floor on a walkway that shuddered with every cycle of the presses below. I was looking for a vantage point, a different angle on the gear press, a way to drop the charge into the mechanism from above. Instead, I found the pit. The gantry overlooked a dimly lit sector, a forgotten corner where the light bulbs were coated in years of grime, casting everything in a sickly, jaundiced yellow. It wasn't a production line. It was a braking yard. Below me, the rhythm of the factory shifted. It wasn't the metallic clang of steel on steel. It was the wet thud of wood on flesh. I froze. My hands gripped the railing so hard the rust bit into my palms. Directly below, a group of laborers had collapsed. They weren't just tired. They were skeletons wrapped in translucent skin, their eyes sunken craters of despair. A guard stood over them. He wasn't SS. He was a factory foreman, a man with a belly and a heavy leather truncheon. He was screaming something lost to the roar of the machines, but his body language was a universal dialect of hate. He swung the truncheon. It connected with the shoulder of a man on the ground. The laborer didn't even cry out. He just crumpled, a marionette with cut strings. This was the ordeal. This was the test. My mission was clear. The gear press was 50 meters to the left. The charge in my satchel was the only thing that mattered. Logic, cold and razor-sharp, dictated that I look away. These men were already dead. They were fuel for the Reich. If I intervened, I exposed the cell. I sacrificed the mission. I saved one dying man only to doom us all. The saboteur in me, the mechanic who saw the world as a series of inputs and outputs, screamed at me to move on, to be still. But the foreman raised his arm again. He turned the truncheon over, gripping it like a hammer, aiming for the skull. I looked at the satchel. It was heavy, filled with the promise of destruction. Then I looked at the railing. Resting there, forgotten by some maintenance crew from a shift long past, was a wrench. A heavy cast-iron pipe wrench. 2 feet of solid leverage. Time distorted. The roar of the HASAG plant faded into a dull drone. I saw the foreman's muscles tense. I saw the laborer's eyes close, accepting the end. I was a factory worker. My job was to make machines run. But this machine, this entire system, from the erratic heartbeat of the press to the rhythmic beating of the man, was broken beyond repair. You do not fix a machine that feeds on blood. You smash it. I unslung the satchel. I set the explosive down on the grating. It was a silent resignation. The cold, disciplined soldier died in that second, leaving only the man. I picked up the wrench. The steel was cold, familiar. Honest, I didn't check for my comrades. I didn't calculate the odds. I swung my legs over the railing and let go. The fall was short, a jarring impact that rattled my teeth. I landed in a crouch behind a stack of crates, the vibration traveling up my shins. The foreman didn't hear me land over the din of the factory. He was focused on his swing. I moved, not with the stealth of a partisan, but with the fury of a man who has seen too much. I didn't shout. I didn't warn him. I swung the wrench. The impact was sickening, a crunch that I felt all the way to my shoulders. The foreman dropped without a sound. The laborers looked up, their eyes wide, uncomprehending. They saw a demon dropping from the sky, a man covered in grease and soot, holding a bloody tool. Then the world exploded. Not the bomb, the chaos. Another guard, one I hadn't seen in the shadows, shouted. A whistle blew, piercing and shrill. The stealth was gone. The mission was a ruin. I grabbed the nearest laborer, the one who had been beaten, and hauled him to his feet. "Run," I screamed, the word tearing at my throat. "Move," we were running through a nightmare. The factory floor became a blur of spinning gears and flashing lights. Bullets sparked against the machinery, whining like angry hornets. I wasn't planting charges anymore. I was hurling debris, overturning carts, smashing gauges with the wrench, creating a wake of entropy to cover our retreat. We were rats in a burning maze. I saw Helmut take a round to the leg, saw him go down. Saw him wave us on before detonating a hand grenade he'd been saving. The blast took out a hydraulic line, filling the air with scalding steam. We used the fog. We scrambled through waste chutes, dragged ourselves through coolant drainage pipes that smelled of chemical rot. We emerged into the cool night air miles away, shivering, retching. Alive, we didn't destroy the press. The tank tracks kept rolling east. We saved 3 men. Just 3. The image dissolves. The steam clears. The face in the mirror is unrecognizable now. The grease is gone, replaced by deep fissures of age. The dark hair is white wisps. I am 83 years old. I sit in a comfortable chair in a reunified Germany. Outside my window, the city of Leipzig hums with a different kind of industry. There are no sirens tonight, but I do not sleep. When I close my eyes, I do not see the foreman I killed. I do not see the SS officers. I see the ones we left behind. I see the hundreds of eyes in that dark corner of the factory, staring at me as I grabbed one man and ran. That is the scar. It is not on my skin. It is on my soul. The realization that you cannot save everyone. That in the arithmetic of war, your heroism is a rounding error. I traded a strategic victory for a moral one, and every day I ask myself if the trade was fair. I look at my hands. They are spotted with age, shaking slightly. These hands built engines. They built bombs. They held the wrench. We are all factory workers. We wake up, we punch the clock, we take our place on the line. We build our world every day with our choices, with our silence, with our compliance. My mission was to break one machine, but the real choice was whether to see the people being broken by it. Do not just look away from the injustice in your factory. Do not tell yourself it is just a job, just an order, just the way things are. The machine only works because we fed it. Do not just refuse the evil. Decide what you are for, and then be prepared to pay the price. The wrench is there, waiting on the railing. You just have to pick it up. This memory is a shard of glass I carry. Help me pull it out. Subscribe to keep this history alive.